și după aia ia 3-4 ore.
Dar s-a întâmplat ceva?
Nu s-a întâmplat nimic, stați liniștită, nu este nicio problemă.
Hai repede.
How did you work on this very detailed analysis of this torture and interrogation? Of course, it's something known. It's part of the life of a Romanian person still now, because I mean it's not so far away. How was also the collection of information about these?
It's not the most accurate things from a documentation point of view. Of course, I read the books. I've discussed with the people. But after a while, I went into a different direction, because the things you discover while searching into that is very cruel. The most intense part, in fact, in preparing the movie was after I decided to work with empathy and sensitivity. In fact, I decided not to have in the film all the informations I got about the torture, for example, which is only a part of the story. Apparently, we've been very creative in torturing people. Some of the methods have name and surname. I hope is rich from a sensitive perspective, not from a psychological perspective. And it was an exercise I proposed to myself to write first and to make a film about that.
I probably would like to contradict you in this because I think, I mean, this psychological aspect and the fact that the person that tortures is shown as a very normal person.
Yes.
And you feel also some empathy for him, and of course he's a hateful person, but at the same time it's really an ordinary person.
Absolutely.
This makes the entire experiment incredibly cruel.
Yeah, I think you are right. My perspective on things was that I can be either one or the other. And this is terrible, to discover while watching the movie moments of sympathy towards the criminal. This means that there is some humanity there which you recognize as well in yourself. And this, I believe, can open a good discussion with yourself. As you say, it's comfortable to have a distance when knowing that the criminal is an evil and the victim is a good man. But could be the other way around. But being placed together by a system so absurd like the one we had, things could be reversed. And this makes the things even more absurd. It's hard to accept it. And having many reactions in my country, I can understand that. It's hard for me to admit that the victims are not necessarily lovable and the criminals are not necessarily hateful. In fact, this was my biggest challenge, how to put in place absurdity with realism, not with surrealism, because this is simple. It was done so many times.
Ia zi tu, mă! Ce faceți voi fiecare vineri seara? Că știu, vezi că știu? ACDC știi? Da, știu.
This was the case. The guy could be your neighbor, as you said, but more than that, it can be yourself. If somebody today can tell me that definitely will behave in the nicest way possible in these circumstances, I somehow don't believe. From both perspectives, the criminal and the victim as well. So I think in circumstances like that, anything can happen, and this is the absurdity of the things. We still in Romania, after 30 years, while we have access to the files of that time, we discover every day very nice people from around us having been collaborated with the regime in various ways, including secret police. And going into that, the step to kill somebody is just a step, is just the next step. Evil can come to each of us.
La miliție sunteți? Da.
Nicio problemă, stați liniștiți, nu vă faceți griji.
From the perspective of dealing with absurdity, once you know how to deal with something, it's not so absurd anymore, it's something predictable. Let's say, But I believe that absurd is something hypnotic. It's like the snake. You don't know how to deal with it. Maybe we'll jump, maybe we'll go, hopefully, but you don't read anything in his eyes. And was portraying, in a way, the lack of reaction we had with the system. Because the system in the 60s, let's say, 50s, it was clear. We could have run, and some of us did that, in the mountains to fight against and to pray for the Americans to come. But the things have completely changed in the 70s, 80s, and the system was kind of a clown, even as criminal as the previous one. But you don't know how to deal with the clown. You can't smash the clown. The clown starts to say poems, to make jokes, and all of a sudden it starts to kick you from not knowing how to deal with something new, absurd.
Se confiscă.
I was an adolescent at that time, and in front of any kind of uniform, we did obey. To be an adolescent at that time, with some rebel visions, listening to rebel music, being in an art school, it's not nice to accept with yourself that, in fact, you haven't said a thing. And I'm sorry for that. Well, it was a mix of coming from a family having some troubles, but not major ones. But I believe the most important reason to touch this subject was the relation with myself. Now I have the feeling that the subject is closed.
Zi-mă, mai tare, ești bărbat, ce dracu faci? Nu se aude și intră peste noi.
In your casting, was it important that they had a sort of more or less direct or indirect experience of this period or in their family?
Not about only this film, but I usually don't believe in this kind of personal influences in the role. It's a script. Of course, we discuss a lot.
And the last night survivor is night.
It was a bit strange, the way of editing this film, because there was quite sharp cut, and you don't understand exactly the reason or the flow that you want to catch or to express with this kind of cut. But then I had the impression, at least, that it was very, very well done, because at the beginning was just more an interrogation mark for me, and then was more and more a sort of relief, sort of... Yeah. A sort of moment of hope. So how was your approach with editing, and how did you work on this specific language?
This is a pretty long story. When doing shorts, I always shot with handheld camera because of the vitality and the realism of things. Like everybody, I was in love with this manner. But I realized that I'm losing the things I'm interested in more than into the narrative part. And usually in my films, the narrative part is a pretty simple one. Here is something pretty easy to be understood. But there is a level of lecture, which for me is much more important, which consists in portraits, in moments, in psychological arguments, on a more aesthetic level. And with this kind of cuts, I decided to break somehow the narrative part. And in that moment, I remember that, in fact, I haven't did film school, I did painting school, and I'm used to think in squares. And if by mistakes they are telling a story all together, I'm happy. But I'm much more interested in the sense of each of them. Transition from point A to B is completely secondary, because I think is not such a big problem in my movie to understand what is all about.
And the last night survivor is the night, and he's watching us all in the eye.
I never have shot anything in the set. I always worked in location before. But I believe that not only from economical point of view, but even from a philosophical, even if it did sound pretentious point of view, but to build a set and to shoot from the walls everything is the right production concept for this movie. I was able to move all the walls, so many frames are having the proportion of the walls. So it's like the walls watching you and having no possibility to hide. It's from all over. I was having the feeling that the walls are photosensitive. They are capturing everything. It's like the Big Brother eye. This is why I've shot like that. This was the concept.
Of the tiger.
This film is a very immersive one. It was quite a shocking experience for us as person. So now the question is about our audience.
I haven't had anybody in mind. I need to admit that. But if you would have put me these questions a few months ago when I just released the film, I would have said only that. Now I can sincerely say that in a way I'm sorry. Well, I was more brave in the beginning, thinking that I don't care about the reactions, but now seeing so many being affected by the movie, I'm asking myself, why? For myself, I know the reason, I know what I feel, and I feel better that I throw out all this venom from inside myself. But what is the guilt of other spectators, I really don't know. So I don't want to corner anybody, I don't want to point anybody. So I am somehow sorry to bring, venom into the world somehow, because we have enough already. There is no need for an extra topping coming from me. Now I do have questions with myself why I have did that. It is finally a movie, and movies are having spectators in the end. I'm not coming from this education. I grew up thinking that I'm staying in my studio, I paint, I draw, and that's it. And if some friends want to see the movie, it's okay. Well, it was okay with the movie as well when I did some screening with my friends. After it went out, yeah, I do have a moral problem with it.
We were not necessarily negative about this, but the discussion we had after watching the film yesterday night, we discussed, and finally it was a sort of dilemma coming out. It is more general dilemma. Very often, for this kind of film, you have a good argument, a very good argument. I mean, people need to know and need to become aware of something, because even the question of perversity, I think perversity is human. I deeply believe that until we don't recognize that perversity is human, we cannot understand ourselves and the world.
I'm totally with you in that.
A fost odată ca în povești, a fost ca niciodată, din de mari împărătești, o prea frumoasă fată.
I haven't had a plan. Why? And what is the need of this film? If it is an anesthesia or a wake-up call, or it was more therapy with myself. I'm very happy with the younger audiences. Yeah, they find that this is an apocalypse of morality. It's not something which ever happened or could happen between human beings. And I think, I hope for better reactions than ours to the system from these guys who think this can't be. Movies are an important tool to raise doubts. This is how I'm doing movies. And this movie is not comfortable for the perspective on communism. It doesn't flatter anybody, and it doesn't necessarily put the anathema to the others. There can be the case when we will exchange the roles if we don't pay attention to morality.
Bă, spune-o că scăpăm amândoi mai bine așa, cine știe mersul aici, eu sau tu?